Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Global Jets or Jet Legend F-18 rebuild, revamp, whatever you want to call it. We're making great progress on this. We've got about 50% done. In the last video, we pretty much did the engine install, tore everything out, got everything figured out. In this video, we are going to finish this aircraft. No idea how long the video is going to be, but stay tuned and we will get into this aircraft revamp. Alright guys, previous video, there's a link down below if you haven't watched it. So, previous video, we got all of the stuff taken out of the aircraft, all of the systems taken out, and all of the old stuff removed. Last video, we basically got the rear portion of the engine or the aircraft figured out. So engine's installed, we've got our rear plate here, our on-off valve, fuel filter, Swewin 170 engine. The back end we've taken a look at, mounted the tail cone, so that stuff is all done. In this video, we are going to be focusing on the front portion of the aircraft and focusing on the remaining systems. So we have figured out kind of where we're mounting everything down in there. So we've got the fuel pump, the data terminal or relay module right there, and that's kind of the plan. So basically what we're doing now is we are going to figure out our tray system here, our tray system there, our mounting of the ECU or data relay module, and once we get that stuff figured out, we can start putting in components in the front portion of this aircraft. We're also getting rid of all the old air valve systems and we're going to Jetronic air valves. So we're going to be replacing all those older air valves with nice new Jetronic air valves. And it's going to make things a lot cleaner, a lot simpler, and just a better way to go in my opinion. Alright guys, so what I've done here is we're going to put the UAT right here. Now when we put the cockpit back in, the corner of the cockpit kind of touches the UAT. So what we can do with that is we can just trim the corner of the cockpit off. So this portion right here won't affect anything. You won't visually see it from the top side. So just keep in mind that when you're doing stuff like that, you can, grind out the cockpit. Nobody's ever going to know about that. Just space-wise, that makes the most sense for the UAT to go there. And now we've got a nice short run to the fuel pump still. So what I'm working on right now is just the layout here. So we've got a couple things going on. So this is the tray that I'm making for this area right here. So what it kind of looks like is basically that. So we've got a couple adjustments, a couple things to do to that tray, but I think that's what we're going to do, and we're going to put the Powerbox Mercury on that tray, possibly the ECU back here, and it's just going to keep things out of the way. As we've talked about previously, essentially we need to keep anything out of this entire space because then the cockpit won't interfere. If we have anything in this space, it'll just interfere with the cockpit. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this portion. What I'm going to go over and above with is I'm going to probably put a little extension on this section right here, and that's going to be where our main power switch for the power box goes, and also the screen here as well too. So we'll have nice access to the power switch and everything right there. Won't interfere with the cockpit, and I think that's gonna work out well. So what I'll do is I'll make a wood extension in the shape that I want it to be, and then we'll just cover all that with the ABS carbon fake stuff there. So still working on this, and there's really no rhyme or reason to getting this done other than you basically just fit the piece of wood. I've been slowly cutting those little grooves out. We could also square off the former, but I don't really want to do that because I want to keep as much of the original former as possible. And then our fastening system for this this whole setup will be 2 screws right here, and they'll probably have on the extension another screw going in the front here as well. Alright guys, so one thing that's going to be a little bit tricky here is that leg that comes back into the fuselage. So We could do this a couple different ways. We could spend a bunch of time kind of organizing the wires, making sure we try and keep them out of the way. The problem with that is once we put that tray in, start pulling the wires to the power box receiver, we don't really know if anything's going to get jammed underneath that leg. So we need to come up with a solution to that, and here's my solution to it. So remember, we don't always need to use orthodox or normal materials. We can use unorthodox materials in aircrafts. So what I've done is I've created a cardboard baffle or cover for that leg. So what we can do is now install it over top of the strut or leg piece, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it's called. And we can glue that to the fuselage. And now this keeps all the wires and anything out of that leg and make sure that nothing interferes with that gear coming down. So all I did was I took a piece of cardboard box and cut it out, made a slit with my X-Acto knife and just put it to the right shape, used some CA and kicker, and it works really well. So what I'll do now is I'm going to flip this over, paint this, especially on the inside, so when we install it in the aircraft, if any moisture or anything comes up, it's not going to destroy the cardboard, but it weighs virtually nothing, and it's a great solution to a problem. All right guys, quick little shot here of what we're doing. So the cardboard piece has been painted. I've reinforced it again with some more CA. Now all I'm going to do is take some shoe goop and put a couple drops on either side, and that's going to be a nice cover for the leg to make sure that we don't get any interference with cables, tubes, and stuff like that. All right guys, we're going to simplify this plane a little bit. So if you look in the nose there, we've got 3 air tanks, 2 on the black and 1 on the gray system. So previously we had the air brake and gear on the black and the brake and the doors on the gray. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify this system, and this will make more sense as we go through it. So we had 4 air actuators previously, which is exactly what we'll have now. So this is the way we're going to set things up now. All the gear stuff's going to be synchronized through the Zykoy air sequencer, which also has a fail-safe built in. So that is something that's important because we can set this so if it gets below whatever 60-70 psi, the gear will automatically drop. Then we've got Jetronic valves for the other systems. So we'll just say gear, gear doors, and air brake. And then we've got another electronic valve, which is going to work the wheel brakes. So a simplified way to plumb your systems is basically your auxiliary systems, like your air brake and your wheel brakes. You can feed those air inputs from the down line of your gear. So I hope this makes more sense as I go through it, but basically to work your gear doors and your gear, you need 2 lines, right? One line is going to make them go up or close. One is going to make them go down or open. So what you want to do is you want to have the supply line for your wheel brakes, the supply line for the air brake, supplied off of the gear down line. So when you initiate gear down, the doors open, the gear comes down, and let's just say it's a black airline. That airline is now pressurized, and you can tee off that airline to feed the other systems. What that does, it's a bit of a fail-safe, so your brakes won't leak air out of the system unless your gear's down, if the brakes were to happen to have a leak. Your air brake on the back of the aircraft won't leak or won't have any air in it until the gear is down. So it's a bit of another fail-safe as well too, so you don't lose a bunch of pressure. That's how I like to set my planes up, just because when the gear's up, there's no need to have brakes on, right? Maybe the air brake in this case, we want to have it on, but I don't think we'll be flying around this F-18 with the air brake on at all. It's just going to be used for landing, and the gear is going to be in the down cycle anyways. So that's the way we're going to plumb this thing. I'll try and be as detailed as possible for you guys, but if you do have any questions, obviously list them in the comments below. But that is the equipment that we're mounting in the front of the plane, and that's what's going to make this whole aircraft work. All right, guys, so continuing on the organization here, we've got the UAT mounted. I used a servo bracket screwed into the former here, and that holds the UAT in nicely. We drilled a hole through the former, and that's got the tube or the pump intake going to the pump through the former. So that goes from a 8mm line, Festo line, with the adapter that comes with the MAP UATs. That goes down to a 6mm, and there'll be a short little run going to the intake of the pump. So that is solved. Now this UAT does interfere with the cockpit. So what I did in this case was put the cockpit in place, mark out where it interferes, and you can see there I've taken the cockpit to the bench grinder and ground down what we need to make it work. So I've already test fit this with a cockpit in, the canopy in, fits really nice and simple, fits well, and it's a nice simple installation, so pulling this in and out isn't a problem. And unless you know what you're looking for, you can't tell that there's that corner ground out of the cockpit tub. So that is success. Now I've also installed the A123 or Life batteries in the front of the nose there. We've got them Velcroed to the mounts that I made in the previous video, and then also a Velcro strap holding them in. So they are, you can take them out, but these batteries are pretty much designed to be left in the aircraft. So that's where those are going to sit. We've got the cockpit dealt with. Next thing we're working on is probably the air system organization. Now we do have a lot of stuff to mount to this plate. So we've got all the valves, obviously. We're switching the air input valve to the BVM purple one, which is just the one that you put the tube in. So that's going to be maybe in here. I might put it closer to the front. And then because of the simplified air system that I've been talking about, all we need is one fill valve, and we're going to put a gauge on there just for a visual indicator that it's got air in it. But keep in mind, you could also use the Zycoy fail-safe, and you can hook up a little screen to that, but we're kind of lacking room in this plane, so we're going to put an actual physical valve in there. All right, so next thing I worked on was the kind of main board here for the air and start system. So that's kind of going in that area right there, fits in there nicely. And there's a bunch of things to think about here. Number one, obviously the cockpit height, right? So we couldn't have anything protruding too far up. I actually think that air gauge is going to be an issue. But anyway, so this is where we turn on the plane. This is where we fill the air, and we can see the gauge there for the air system. So I wanted to get this one done so we can run that air valve or the air line, the main fill line forward, and then we can also run the Powerbox Mercury screen and push button thing backwards, put this in, and then we'll start working on the other systems here as well too. So yeah, that's the next thing we've gone to. I think the next thing we're going to go to is the main receiver setup. So all this stuff here, because we want to have our gear sequencer line coming forward, and we've got to run some more lines coming forward, and we want to do that before we actually fasten that guy down. So that is definitely the problem with aircrafts like this with not a ton of room, is you really have to plan out, otherwise you're taking things out and in and out and in and out and in. So next thing I'm going to figure out here is our main plate and what equipment and lines and stuff, like the fuel line that we need to hook up beforehand. The cover for the gear in there, the white thing that we made out of cardboard, it worked out absolutely awesome. I used shoe goop to put it in place, and it is solid, working great. All right, so here is the main board that is going in this area right here. Now, the reason I laid this out the way I did is because it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get all the servo lines in, but we're going to be needing to access the battery more than the servo lines, right? When you're done, you want to, at the end of the day, you want to unplug the battery connections to your power box, because it's going to suck battery from your batteries. So that's why we laid things out the way we did, and these battery connections will be quite easily accessible right in this area, no problem at all. That's all done. We did up a nice short lead here for the turbine line going to the data relay module, and so this is pretty much ready to install, I think. I did run the lines to the pump in there. You can't really see them, but pretty straightforward. They are run and they are complete. All right, so one of the final little things here that really taxes my brain is the air tray. So just slowly working on this, trying to make this as tidy and neat and compact as possible. So the way this is going to be set up is we've got our main gear, our doors, this is going to be for our air brake, and our line, whatever line that comes off that feeds our gear down, is going to feed the air brake and also the wheel brakes. Now, wheel brake solenoid I'm going to install right there. So we're just going to put a drop of shoe goop on there to hold it. The output line is already hooked up, and that is this this T right here that feeds back to the output line. The input line we still haven't hooked up yet, so we'll deal with that once we get that in place. But that's where we're going to put the brake one, just because of room and simplicity and running lines, and there's lots of different reasons. So next thing we have to do is we have to turn on the receiver. We've got to program the Zycoi system. Now, I've covered this in other videos. I'm not going to cover it in this video. Last video I covered it in, I believe, was the F-18 build. But there is a decent way to program these things. And this one's going to be pretty simple because we just have doors open, gear down. When you initiate the gear up signal, the gear comes up and doors close. So it's a pretty simple setup on this particular one. But the other thing to think about when you're programming these Jetronic valves is they like to start up on red. So one of these sides is red, one of them's green. I can't remember which one's which. But you want to make sure that your gear down, for example, is on your red side. If you do it on your green side, you're going to have some issues. What I've seen happen in the past is somebody has their aircraft sitting on the ground with the gear down. They're going for a flight. They turn the radio on, and the gear down is plugged into the green side, and the valves will default to the red side. So the airplane gets turned on and the gear pops up. So just make sure that your gear down condition is plugged on to the red side. Doors open condition is plugged on to the red side. That's the best way to remember it and think about it and set it up. All right, guys, I'll just cover this briefly here. So basically, the way to think about the Zycoi sequencer is you've got multiple steps, okay, as you go through the cycle. We're only using output number 1 right there for the gear channel or for the actual struts, and we're using number 3 just to have some space. So that's why we've got it marked G1 and G3. So gear down position, we want open and open set up on the data terminal or the Zycoi sequencer. So when I go to gear down, doors open, gear comes down. So in our gear down condition, we've got red that we're using, and we've got red that we're using. Okay, so that's the channels that we're going to be plugging our gear down lines in and doors open in. Okay, so all we're doing is we're just setting these conditions as we go through. So gear down, we're open, open, and this just tells the channel what to do. So when we initiate the gear up sequence, the gear comes up. Okay, doors stay open, gear comes up, doors stay open, gear comes up, doors close, gear comes up, doors close. When we initiate the gear open, we're basically going doors open, gear down. Okay, so it's a pretty simple setup as long as you understand that you're doing it in steps. So we'll go gear down right now, or sorry, gear up. So gear comes up, green, and eventually doors will close. There we go. All right, so now that we've got our gear essentially programmed, what we're going to do now is we're going to set up our plumbing for feeding the air brake. So now that we know that this side is red, we're going to tee off this side, and we are going to basically supply our air brake channel or air brake solenoid from the red line, and we'll also have another T here feeding the brake solenoid, which is over there. All right, so we've got the tray all ready to go. Just cleaned up the wires here a little bit. Another option with this is you can cut these wires and put new servo ends on them so they're just really short. I've just chosen to keep these ones full length. And the four-way splitter here, basically we've got this line, which is our excess line. That's going to feed our brake, and then this is actually our gear down line is going to plug into there. So we've pretty much got everything ready in this section. This is the main supply lead coming up here, so that comes from this direction from our filler valve and our gauge, and then we've got it teed off here, and that goes into all of our air tanks in the nose. So I think we're basically ready to install the air tray into the nose. So I'm going to fit that in, try and route these lines nicely, and hopefully we've got enough length on all those lines to hook up to our valves. All right, so the tray is installed. We've got everything as neat as possible. It's definitely more functional than neat. I mean, we only have so much room to work with, so that is what we came up with. So everything's run, everything's plumbed. We did the brake line, which is this one right here. That's run to this side where the brake solenoid is right there. So we still have a little bit of cleanup to do there, but we are installed. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to run those servo wires forward, like this one for the air brake. Get all that stuff run this direction, and then we'll put our middle plate on, or our intermediate plate, and once that's on, then we'll start to focus on the main plate and plugging all the connections in and everything. So, alright guys, next thing I've done here is install the mid plate, so that's all installed. Double checked the room underneath. There's lots of room for those air valves or air lines, so that is all done and working good. Next thing I'm going to do is work on putting the main plate in. So the main plate is pretty straightforward. It's just going to need a bunch of connections done up. So that's the biggest deal. Fortunately, we've got our layout done already, right? Which we've talked about previously. So all we need to do is take all those connections, put them in the right location on the Power Box Mercury, and we should be golden. All right, so the main plate is all installed, everything's plugged in, we've got the GPS mounted there. Next thing we're doing is extending the battery leads. They're not quite long enough here, so I'm just adding a little extension on there so we have something to plug into. And that will be one of the last things we do, other than making a couple little mounts and stuff like that. We still have the lead for the turbine battery kind of hanging out. And with that, we are going to position the battery where it needs to be to find the C of G. So that's fine. And I filled this up as well with air when I first installed the plate, and we're still holding air about an hour later, so that is good. And just going to finish up these battery leads. All right, and we are fully installed. Everything is good to go. I had to make some adjustments to the cockpit, basically for the air gauge there, for the actual power box unit in this area. Just a little bit more grinding, but no big deal at all. So the only thing we have left to do is with the battery lead for the turbine. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this airplane, put it on the stand over there, and we are going to do an engine run-up on this aircraft. Alright guys, so I just turned the power on the airplane, and you can hear the elevators working there. So gear's in the up position here. We're just going to flick the gear switch and we will see what happens. We're sitting at about 100 PSI right now. Okay, so doors open. Beautiful. So I'm just going to check all the doors, all the hinges. Nice. When Global put this plane together, or whoever did, they did a really good job hinging this as well too. It's done really, really nicely. So yeah, everything looks good. Nose steers, but it's steering the wrong direction, so we'll fix that. But we still have to fasten that back on with a zip tie. But first step, gear works. All right, and next thing here that I'm just checking is the air brake. Now, you remember that when the gear is down, the air brake system operates. When the gear is up, the air brake system and the brake system will not operate. So when this gear is up, it doesn't work. Now that the gear is down, air brake works. Lots of force on that thing. Beautiful. All right, guys, we are in the home stretch of the Tiger F-18. I think it's called a Tiger Meet scheme. The Tiger Meet F-18 just have programming to do left and final checkovers and stuff like that. So basically what I did today is I did a bunch of research on throws and things like that. CFG points for this plane. So that's what I'm working on right now. What I'm going to do is I'll probably just get all this set up and then I'll cover with you guys what this is. So in the future, if you happen to be building one of these aircraft, at least it'll be taken care of, or I'll list it in the links down below. But basically we're just doing the setup now of everything. We are going to go with just a regular aileron setup and a regular elevator setup. That's the way I flew my F-18, my TAMS F-18, which was the last one I had. And flew really, really well. So that's the way we're going to keep this one. That's the way it's recommended. So we're going to have separate ailerons, separate elevators. And so I'm going to get all the programming done. Then we'll do the CFG. So the CFG is a pretty wide range. It's basically 140 to 160 millimeters. So basically 140 millimeters is kind of the front of the front spar. 160 would be back about here. From what I've read, basically if you balance this right on that front spar or front carbon rod, it works out really well. So that's where we're going to balance this plane. Now with balancing the plane, as I've talked about a bunch already, we are going to have to place the turbine battery to balance this thing out. I have a feeling it's going to go in the nose, just kind of based on initial thoughts here. But anyways, guys, I'm going to program this thing. I'll show you all the programming once it's done, and then we'll do final checks and balances. All right, guys, so all the programming is done on the 18. We basically have our ailerons programmed, our flaps, which is takeoff flaps, landing flaps. There's a little bit of elevator compensation, as you can see here. So there's no flaps. First flaps, second flaps. And we've got rudder set up, nose wheel set up. Now the way this is set up is we've got both rudders going to rudder A on the Mercury unit. Rudder B is being used for the nose wheel. So what that means is we won't be able to do the rudder air brake thing where both of the rudders come in, which isn't a big deal because we have an air brake on this unit. But what it has done is it's put a nose wheel or a gyro on the nose wheel, so it's going to help with tracking as we go down the runway. So that is all done. We're essentially done this airplane other than the CFG. So what we're going to do is we're going to hang the airplane on a string on the main spar and just do it the old-fashioned way because it's exactly where we need to do the CFG on it. And we're going to hang it and see where we come in at. And then all we're going to do is take the turbine battery. We're going to be using one of the lighter side of RC 3300 milliamp 3-cell LiPo batteries. These are available on the website, link down below, for the turbine in this aircraft. And we're just basically going to position it wherever we need to. I have a sneaking suspicion, as I've already said, it's going to end up in the nose, but we'll find out. I will show you our findings. All right, we've enlisted help of beautiful wife. Who doesn't want to be on camera. All right, so what we're going to do is we've put the string around the main spar. We have a tube going in between the string, and we will lift this up and see where it needs to go. So essentially everything's on the plane. When you do CFG like this, you want to be in landing conditions. So the amount of fuel you're going to land with, your UAT is full, your gear is down, and that's how we're going to CFG the aircraft. So I'm going to just put the battery right there on top of the cockpit or in that area, and we'll lift it up and see what happens. So she's tail heavy. Okay. So first go, tail heavy. So now what we'll do is we'll take that LiPo battery and we will stuff it kind of in the nose where we would be able to put it. Put everything back in. Still nose tail heavy. Now we need to add some lead. Alright, so we got her all CFG'd. We have to add quite a bit of weight. So here is all the weight that we have put in the front of this plane. So I think it's roughly about 1 pound or so. What I'm going to do is I'll go grab my scale. We'll take all of this off and weigh it and see how much we need to add in. So what I'm also going to do now that we've done this the old-fashioned way is I'm going to get my Zykoi scale, put this on the scale, and we'll do it the modern way and see what we come up with and see if it's any better, the same, worse, whatever it is. So once I get that programmed, I'll show you guys those results and tell you what we ended up here adding to the nose. All right, so this is what we need to get this thing balanced. So 266 plus that one, plus that one, plus that one. So we need 497 grams. 1 pound is 454 grams, so just over 1 pound of nose weight to balance this plane according to the string method. All right, so we've got all of our measurements entered. This plane empty weighs 36 pounds. Wow, that is hefty. So let's see what the CAG says. So we are, as it says there, tail heavy. Add 1.06 pounds at the correction point, and I put the correction point as right here. So if you go into our calculator, 496 grams, that's what we need to add, divided by 454, which is 1 pound, that gives us 1.09 pounds. And they say add 1.07 pounds at the correction point. So we are very, very close. So what we can do now with the Zykoi scale is we can put all these weights on the nose and just confirm, double confirm that this is the correct amount. This is 496 grams worth of weight. All right, so we've got all the weight sitting there on the aircraft. So we are basically exactly bang on, 177 millimeters in front of the main landing gear. So that confirms everything. Last thing I need to do is basically figure out how we're going to mount that weight in the nose, how we're going to mount the battery in the nose, and we need to get that stuff sorted, and we are almost done. Alright guys, so we got the batteries up in the nose there. We've got all the lead added in the nose. That all worked out good. So all of our connections and everything are in the front of the aircraft. Alright guys, we are officially done with this aircraft. Everything is ready to go. So last step I did here was just do a channel layout on the power box. So in the future, if I need to do any adjustments or the owner needs to do any adjustments, it's all very simple. We know what each channel is because it's all labeled. Don't need to pull a manual or anything like that. So this plane is complete, and the owner's actually on his way right now to pick it up. So fun little quick project getting this plane set up. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, don't forget to list them down below. Excited to see this thing fly. Probably won't see it till next year because we're getting into our winter season here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. But this should be an absolute sweet plane to fly. Should fly like a sweetheart. And looking forward to this. So thanks guys for watching. And if you have any questions, again, list them down below. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. And we will see you in the next video.